Welcome to Authors at Drucker. I'm Dave Specht, Director of the Global Family Business Institute at the Drucker School of Management. At the Drucker School, we aspire to become the global meeting place for the world's most influential business-owning families. This conversation today represents progress in our achievement of that objective. Authors at Drucker is an interview series where we feature top authors that write about issues impacting business-owning families. Authors at Drucker is made possible from the generous sponsorship from the J. Hughes Jr. Foundation. And Jay's on the call with us today as well, so thank you so much, Jay. The foundation is dedicated to advancing the study of family governance and generational well-being. We at the Drucker School feel very aligned and very grateful to Jay and the foundation for their support in making this possible. Last month, we heard from Chad Ford, author of Dangerous Love, a book about transforming fear and conflict at home, at work, and in the world. If you missed that, please do visit our website so you can listen to the recording. And before we begin, I wanted to mention two other exciting initiatives happening at the Drucker School Global Family Business Institute. I'm just going to share my screen real quick here. One of those initiatives is our certificate program in advising family enterprises. In this, we partner with financial institutions, CPA firms that have advisors that want to get more intuitive about working with business owning families at the intersection of the financial and non-financial lives that they're leading. So that is one of the programs we're very excited about. If you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to me. The second is our Generational Wealth Masterclass, which is coming soon, which I participated in filming 25 different sessions with Jay Hughes. And if you'd like to be on the list as that comes out, please do shoot me an email and we'll add you to the list. Without any further ado, let's get to our author for today. I want to introduce to you Tom McCullough, and I'll give the brief version, Tom.
Thank you.
Tom's an adjunct professor of finance at Rotman and teaches private wealth management. He's also the chairman and CEO of Northwood Family Office, LP, a multifamily office which serves the comprehensive needs of families of significant net worth. Northwood Family Offices is one of the leaders in its field, has consistently been recognized as the #1 Canadian family office by Euromoney in its Global Private Bank Survey. Tom's married and has 2 children. Tom, thank you so much for being willing to join me today at Authors at Drucker.
No, thanks very much, Dave. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Well, we're going to have fun. And first of all, before I get to my first question, in my mind, as I'm going through this book, I'm trying to figure out how did Tom figure this out? And this is what I came up with. You woke up one morning and you thought, you know what if I called Peter Vogel from IMD in Switzerland, Jamie Traeger Mooney in Israel, Christian Stewart in Singapore, Matt Wesley at Merrill, Michelle Osry at Deloitte, and 45 other authors, and asked them to give away their best practical secrets in working with clients so that we could put it in a book and give it away to the world for $36. Now, is that how that happened?
Pretty much. Yeah, it's very. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm interested in learning the real backstory. I don't want to lead the audience too much.
Sure. Well, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time to be part of this conversation. I know you've got lots going on in your lives, so it's great to be here together. As Dave said, I've been working with families for over 30 years now. Started when I was 10. There are what we kind of realize is that there's many common issues that come up. Every family's different, but a lot of the issues end up being fairly common. But the answers are not simple, and they're not all in one place. The other thing I realized at some point is that not every advisor and not every family has all the answers. We know that for sure, but there is a lot of wisdom out there. And so, as Dave says, I teach an MBA class at the University of Toronto, and there was a book that I used for the class by a guy named Harold Evensky, who is a investment guy, and it's called The Investment Think Tank, and it was this book full of thoughtful articles by thinkers in that field. And I thought, wow, what a great format for a book. And what if we use that kind of format to take all those questions that wealthy families have and pull them together and put them in one place? It's kind of a service to families, we thought, to identify, collect, organize, curate all of these questions and answers. And we sort of thought the idea of wealth of wisdom is sort of, I don't know, I thought of like a potluck dinner. Imagine saying to all your friends, what is the meal that your family enjoys the most? And then everybody bring that thing, and what a feast. So that was our idea. So maybe just give a bit of context. There's two books, two Wealth of Wisdom books. One of them, the first one, came out about 3 years ago, and it's called The Top 50 Questions Wealthy Families Ask. And so those were the questions that I've heard when my co-author, Keith Whitaker, we've heard over many, many years talking to families. And what we did is we said, here's these 50 questions. We could answer them ourselves, but we thought, well, why don't we go to the people in the world who are maybe the most thoughtful on that particular question? And that's how we ended up doing this. We went to these folks and said, would you indeed, write this piece? And then that was the first book. The second book, then we said, well, what if we took the same concept, and instead of doing questions and answers, what if we identified the very best top practices that they use in their own practice and collate all of them together in one book? So that's the story, simple as that.
Well, you've created something that I feel like is a fantastic resource, not only for the families, but for advisors that are trying to become more intuitive and more effective, more efficient with these families. One of the things I love about Wealth of Wisdom is just how it's organized. In my mind, it's kind of the ultimate reference guide for advisors and these wealth holding families. I love that the chapters are concise and snackable, and also very practical. It's not necessarily a book that you'd read cover to cover, unless you just really, really want to go deep into this like immediately and just consume it all. But I love it. So let's talk a little bit about the structure of the book, Tom. The first section is thinking through what matters most. And tell me maybe why you started there and maybe what that section uncovers.
Yeah, and just before I do, Dave, I might just mention that for those people who, I think the book is very snackable. I totally agree. It's the kind of thing that's a reference guide. You can look at it and delve into the area that you're thinking about as a family or an advisor. Just to mention, there are podcasts. So we did a podcast interview with each of the contributing authors. So those are all available wherever you get podcasts. Or if you want to go to wealthofwisdombook.com, they're all listed there. So freely available to everybody. So
we'll put a link in the response at the end of this too.
Right. I think I said it wrong. It's wealthofwisdombook.com. Not sure if I said it correctly. But yes, so the first section of the book is called Thinking Through What Matters Most. And, crazy us, we thought, well, let's start at the beginning. Let's start before we launch into all these things to do. Why don't we help people think about what it is that they want? And I tell you, I must say that's been my experience in our family office for all these years. We've been doing it for 20 years as a multifamily office. And oftentimes people come to the first meeting and they want to know what to do. What are we going to do? What is the asset mix? What's our tax plan? When's the first family meeting? And we are often the ones that say, well, let's back up. What do we want? What is the context? What do you want? And often I'd say people often don't know what they want. So we have a whole series of questions to draw out, what is it that we want? Some people will say, do you want to leave money to your kids? Well, I don't know. Well, do you want to leave, or how much do you want to leave to your kids? I don't know. Well, do you want to leave zero? No. Well, do you want to leave all of it? No. Okay, well, we know it's between zero and all. So let's start to talk about it. But really just helping people begin to think about the questions. And in the context of the Wealth of Wisdom books, these are questions, existential ones. What do we believe? What do we value? What's most important to us? What's important in our relationships? What does wealth mean? What does well-being mean? How are our needs changing over time? How will they change over time? So there's all sorts of great chapters, and I would certainly encourage you to have a look at the book in Wealth of Wisdom 2, which is the top practices that we're talking about today. There's great ones. There's a couple I'll mention if that's okay, Dave. One of them is Kristen Keffler has a chapter on character strengths. and how you use character strengths in conversations as a family. She's got 3 examples she uses that she's used for years. Signature strengths, which is really just picking those 5 things that are your top strengths and working and focusing on those. She talks about strength spotting, which you can essentially do as a family or group and talk to somebody about their top 1 or 2 strengths that you really value. And then she also talks about taking the family genogram, which is really just a family a tree,
basically, yeah.
Various things marked on it, and put strengths of those people on it. And what you end up building is a sense of who the family, was and is, and what are things that you want to shoot for. So that's just one example about what is it, what are the things that matter most. And the second one I'll mention is a concept that some of you will have heard of. It's a Japanese word called ikigai, and it really means what gives life purpose, or what's your reason for being. And it's this great Venn diagram. If you like geometry and you went to school, it's the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And for some families of wealth, maybe the getting paid for doesn't matter so much. Maybe it's the other 3 that are more important. But what a great conversation starter for, especially for next generation people, or people who've sold a business. Maybe their whole purpose seemed to be the business. And as you graduate from that into the next phase of life, what is my purpose? What is the intersection of those factors? So many other great ones. Ellen Perry has 4 great questions. I won't read them to you, but if you get the book, it's chapter 1. Look at those questions. What a great set of conversation starters for the book.
Fantastic. No, I love that you started there, because I think as an advisor to these families, we really need to kind of check our assumptions and leave our assumptions behind, and not assume what families need, but really ask. And I feel like this section does a good job of saying, pause, ask questions, don't assume what is important to them. And for the families themselves, don't assume ourselves what our kids want, what our kids are passionate about. Let's ask them, let's listen, let's be curious. So I love that you started there.
Dave, one of the questions that we ask people in our discovery meetings with them, and it's a great one, we've used it for years, and we say, what are the best 3 things you've done for yourself and your family in the last 12 months?
It's a good one.
And we wait an uncomfortably long period of time until both husband and wife, if it's a couple, answer those questions. And it takes some thinking.
Yeah.
By the way, they're rarely about money. And then after that's done, we ask them the question, how do you want to answer that question 12 months from now? And there's a wide open question that does not assume anything. It says, what is important to you? And mostly what happens, the answers don't matter. What matters is they begin to talk, and they begin to form in their own mind what's important to them, because they may never have been asked to do that in the past.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love asking questions that there aren't right or wrong answers. It's just encouraging people to basically open their hearts and pour out to you as their advisor, what's really important, and then for you to be able to translate that for them into some actionable things. So the next section, you talk about becoming a learning family. What does it mean to you to be a learning family, and what are some things that you've seen from from our practitioners that submitted to that section?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, learning family, that term is, I'd say somewhat new, the last, half decade or so maybe. But the concept is old. It is, expanding your map. My wife always talked to her when our kids were younger. She would say, you've got this map, and if you venture outside of that, your map expands and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I think it's a great concept. I would say that, most families, certainly most wealthy families that we're involved with are interested in education broadly, best education for the kids and so on. But I don't know if many of them would call themselves a learning family. Do they learn together? People get education, but are they a learning family together? And I think the idea really is that families who succeed don't kind of limit their understanding of learning. They make conscious choices to open themselves up to, venturing out and enlarging their map. So, how do you do that? How do you check your assumptions? How do you evaluate decisions? How do you have a growth mindset? Those kinds of things fall into that learning category, learning family category. In the book, there's also all sorts of things. Dennis Jaffe talks about benchmarking against successful families. So he's done a study on 100-year families, and he talks about, you know, do you want to get some facts? What's the context? How are we doing in these areas? Maybe all of them aren't your goals, but maybe some of them are. Bart Parrott, who I see on the call, he talks about, you know, things like after an event, like a business sale. You know, how do you think about that? What's true now? What's possible? What's our plan? So those are the kinds of conversations. There's a couple of great chapters on developing a wealth education plan for the family. And Kirby Rossblock does one, and Ruth Steverlink and Greg Burrows do another one. So the point of this book was to have these actual practices, checklists, questionnaires, group exercises that somebody could take and use in their own family or with clients. And we have that all the time. We've actually got one client who's very, very diligent, and his kids have bought into that. And they have family meetings that the kids will rotate the chair and set the agenda. And what he's done is he's taken some of his old business decisions he's made, and they kind of role play them. And he's kind of teaching his kids, you know, here's how, like, what would you guys do in this situation?
Yeah.
And they've done that enough years that he brings them real current business cases that his kids can be involved in and weigh in on. So there's, you know, that's just
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. I like to think of, you know, for my own kids, you know, I want to raise an experience-rich generation. And when you talk about learning, you know, building in experiences and exactly what you're talking about, letting them make decisions and encouraging them to, we'll get to it a little later, but shared decisions is one of the toughest things. And how do you teach them, and how do you model what it looks like to make good, you know, good partners?
Yeah, absolutely.
The third section talks about planning thoughtfully, and I really appreciated this section because, again, it's full of practical, but it's also non-financial in terms of plans. When you think about those words, planning thoughtfully, I think people automatically think of the techniques and the strategies to save tax and to, you know, transfer wealth from one generation to the next. But that's not really what this section is about. Do you want to dive into some of the planning thoughtfully section?
Yeah, and to quote Warren Buffett, a little bit of planning goes a long way. And I think that's been my experience, certainly financially, but certainly in other areas as well. And the chapter or the section covers that. John Mornick talks about expressing purpose in your trusts. So it's not just you know, getting the documents right and the terms correct and the proper trustee, although those are important, but also making sure that it's passed, you know, it's set up with a warm heart, not a cold hand.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a gift of love, and this is, you know, what we've learned from Jay Hughes and many other people in that field over the years. And I think John does a great job on that. Scotty McLennan talks about the concept of an ethical will, and quite frankly is open and honest enough to share the ethical will he wrote to his children. And an ethical will really is just a communication, a non-financial communication of what you think is important, what you're bestowing to your next generation. Jay talks about the concept of a family bank, and how money can be used and shared responsibly, along with education that comes with that. There's a family owner's manual. You know, how many people have seen a parent die and all the information is not available? So how do you plan for that? And then there's a bunch that are related to aging, diminished capacity, you know, all the issues about the Prince Charles syndrome. There's a guy who thought he was going to have the top job for a long time, and his mom kept living. And when he lived in limbo for a whole long period of time. And that's very, very true. As people live longer, you know, and especially if there's only one brass ring, what happens? How do you think about that? And I've got a client, I'm involved with them, particularly in their philanthropic work. and we're their family office, but I'm involved in the philanthropy. And but we were talking about one of the adult children was talking about something happening to their one of their parents, and they had to put together they went to the hospital, they had to put together a bag for them, and they didn't know which medications they were on, what stuff they needed. And then that led to a conversation about, you know, you guys live in a 3-story house with only a powder room on the main floor, you're in your 80s, should we not be planning for something? And you know, it's so there's just all sorts of things that people need, just a little trigger to help them think through, and somebody to help get them there. And back to the Warren Buffett thing, a little bit of planning in areas like that end up being unbelievably helpful going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So moving on to the next section, you talk about investing wisely. And as I think about investing across multiple generations, I mean, it's complex because you're dealing with different time horizons, the risk tolerance when you're talking about someone that's 80 and another person that's maybe 25. I mean, there's so many different things to consider in the dynamics of you know, how families invest wisely. What was your biggest hope for this section of the book?
My biggest hope is that folks would think about investing as a tool for the lives of their families, as opposed to, you know, trying to figure out the market or an investment product. It's a very large and loud industry that tells you how you have to operate financially, and you have to predict things and choose the right product, or you're wrong. What people need in many cases is some kind of framework, a logical, thoughtful framework to make decisions. So for example, starting with their goals. I know it sounds crazy. There's this thing called goals-based wealth management. And I always think to myself, is that like oxygen-based breathing? Like, how would you not factor goals into investments? But I think it's very true. People jump in and say, I have to do something without clearly understanding their goals. And if you really think about it, there's only 2 things you can do with money. You can spend it, or you can give it away. Yes, you could save or invest, but that's to spend or give away. So that means you've got a set of lifetime liabilities that have to be funded, and you've got a set of legacy liabilities that have to be funded. Yeah. So if you take X, say $100 million that somebody has, and say, well, how much has to be set aside to fund our lifetime objectives invested conservatively? Maybe it's $15 or $20 million. That means there's $80 million. That's for somebody else in the future, later. So our hope was in this article, in this section, is that people will develop a framework that helps them make sound decisions, as opposed to reacting to things, to be proactive and plan their lives in integration with all the other pieces of the puzzle.
No, I love it. I love it. I'm currently working with a family, and they're worth several $100 million. And the question of how to invest and even cash flow planning is still a question. You know, it's still an issue. And anyways, yeah, it's definitely a dynamic topic.
There's a bunch of great chapters in that section, but one of them that I find very interesting is a fellow named Jim Garland, and it's a family who sold their coal mining supply business in the 1970s. So they've been a financial family for many, many years. And they've got this trust that basically distributes income to beneficiaries. But he talks about the concept of chicken farmers and egg farmers. And a chicken farmer is somebody who buys a chicken and hopes that the price of chickens goes up. So that's like a total return investor. You buy a stock and your hope is that that stock will go up, but then you'll sell it. But he says, we're not chicken farmers in our family, we're egg farmers. So eggs are like dividends. So when you buy a chicken, why are you buying the chicken? So it produces eggs. What happens to the price of chickens? Well, you don't really care. In fact, if they go down, it's cheaper to buy an egg producer. So again, there's a framework for that family. Every family is different and every trust is different. But for that family, that was a very helpful structure that allowed them to make sound, thoughtful, forward-thinking decisions and not react to every trend that somebody tells you on CNBC.
I love that story. So I'm going to pause real quick, and I want to invite our participants to just submit any questions they might have in the chat, We're going to leave the last 20 minutes or so for you to be able to have conversation with Tom and I. So please do put some of those questions in the chat, and we'll get to those in just a minute. The next part, or the next section, is about seeking sound advice. And this concept of building a team of advisors seems like one that people would pay a lot of attention to and be very serious about. But I find some of the people that end up on the teams of these families is a curious thing. It's a friend, it's someone they were roommates with in college. And now I also think about like the auditing and the editing of that team over time. The purpose of an advisor might change as the family changes, as their wealth dynamic changes. As you think about selecting a team of advisors, or editing that team of advisors, or adding to that team of advisors, what are some best practices that you could give to our listeners to consider?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one is near and dear to my heart. I'm doing a lot of thinking about it these days, partly because I have to write an article for the Journal of Wealth Management on the role of the integrated advisor. But I think about it a lot, and I was thinking about, for this conversation, what is it that we all of us look for in advisors? And I think there's many things, but you could maybe break it down into three. Somebody with skills and experience, so they have to know what they're talking about. Somebody who can communicate in a way that we can understand and is relatable, and somebody with an objective eye that is trustworthy. So, there's probably other things, but those are really quite an important combination. And the challenge is that I'll call it, broadly speaking, the industry is fraught with conflicts of interest and misinformation and confusion and people putting themselves in different categories. It's very, very difficult for families to parse that. And the other thing I've been thinking about recently too is this idea, of collaboration. And you think about an advisor working in a complex area on behalf of the family, and you obviously have to collaborate with other people because you don't know everything. But often what happens in collaboration is that there's no leader. And so somebody has to do the integration. So integration will happen because an accountant says one thing, a lawyer says another, an investment person, and a family advisor, and somebody has to integrate. So it's either the family that is doing that, or you have to hire somebody who has those kinds of, I'll call them general contractor skills. And I find it a really important thing that a lot of families don't really think about. And I was talking to somebody just the other day, and they were looking for an advisor, but they were obviously uncertain as to what kinds of skills that person should have, what their needs were. And Greg Rogers has wrote a very interesting piece thinking about helping wealthy families choose advisors. And he said there's sort of two parts to this. One, he calls finding the right airport. So what kind of advisor do you need, and do you know what you're looking for? And then the second part is landing the plane. But again, sometimes people want to land the plane, like find the advisor, but they don't even know is it the right airport. Yeah. So it's a very tricky thing, and that's one kind of advisor. And then there's very specific types of advisors, like trustees, who have different and separate types of responsibilities, both legal and fiduciary, but also relational to the family. And so all of those things, there's chapters on all of those in the book. A great one by Kim Kamen on choosing trustees. What's the process you go through? How do you, and as I said before, all of these chapters are built to be, practical checklists, things that you can take to use in your own family. And so that's our vision. Hopefully people find this useful in their own situations.
Tom, I love the analogy of the general contractor and the specialist, because oftentimes if a general contractor is not named, I mean, you can imagine the chaos if the specialists don't know when to show up, don't know how to show up, don't know how to interact with the family, and everyone wants to be the favorite advisor to the family. So if the family doesn't say and state, like, no, this is the general contractor, this is who we're going to clear everything through, And this is the interaction point. It just introduces a lot more complexity for the family, and they probably end up wasting a lot of resources just by the sheer chaos and the lack of collaboration with that general contractor. So I love that analogy. It really works for me, especially I'm adding onto my house right now, and without the general contractor, I just see chaos of people showing up whenever, and there's no order to it. And anyways, it was particularly relevant to me right now, Tom.
And it's a very specific set of skills, it's project management and process and organization. It's different set of skills than an electrician has. I don't want my contractor being the electrician. Maybe he or she used to be that, but hasn't been for 25 years. One interesting concept that I think was written about many years ago by people like Jim Grubman and Keith Whitaker, who's my co-author of this book. When they think about the role of advisors, it's always a question as to how far you move out of your own area of expertise, because a client will often need, help in other areas. And they talked about this idea of green light, yellow light, red light. And green light is when it is an area that you can help with. So for example, an investment person helping somebody talk a little bit about philanthropy, or maybe helping them organize their first, meeting or something. So that's something that somebody in one profession could actually help out in another area. Yellow light is where you think, oh boy, this is getting into be quite specific. I should partner with somebody who's an expert. And a red light situation is where you say, this is beyond my capability. Let's just say it's, an addiction in the family. We need to bring in a specialist and back away ourselves. So it's just an interesting construct for the role of an advisor, and how do they work with families, and because the families do have integrated needs. So how does that happen, and what role does each advisor play? Is a good question.
Yeah. So the next section, Tom, is about raising the rising generation. Every parent on this call today should be grateful for this section. What's one thing you feel is most important in raising an independent and well-grounded rising generation?
Yeah, people, with our first book, it was called The Top 50 Questions Wealthy Families Ask. And people often say to me, what is the top question? What is the top one or two questions people ask? And
give me the silver bullet, Tom. Give me the silver bullet.
What is the silver bullet? Well, it's not the bullet. It's just the question. It's just the thing that holds it. But really, the main question people ask is about kids and money. That is the most common question. People wrestle with it, and it's a funny thing, because we want to, we work really hard and build all these values, to build something for our kids, build wealth that we can share with our kids, and then we're worried about the impact the wealth will have on them. It's this strange, yin and yang. And so what people often want is, how do we give kids the benefits of wealth, opportunities, and so on, but ensure that they're responsible, grounded, others oriented, which I think we all want. So the lessons that I've learned over time, and you'll see them in the chapters in that section as well, is as much as possible, allow kids to experience normal consequences. Often what happens is money and power can help kids avoid natural consequences. So think of the university student with a beer budget and goes to university, and halfway through the month, they've gone through their budget, and mom and dad are busy, and they love Junior, who's at university, so they top it up. And what does Junior learn? That there's no such thing as a budget. I just have to ask. I don't have to manage myself. And but it's hard, and it takes time to do the opposite. So, don't parent with your wallet if you can help it. And I think that's a great lesson. Another one that I'm sure you mentioned it, values are caught, not taught. If somebody said, if I followed you around for 3 weeks, I could tell you what your values are without ever talking to you. So, younger children, older children, anybody sees what we do, and that's how they form our values. Doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about them. I think you should as well, but certainly people see us on the phone with Verizon and, see our frustration, or how we speak to, a clerk in a store or whatever. And those are the And it's very interesting. In the first book, Thayer Willis talks about legacy, and she has this challenge for us that I think is just amazing. I did it myself, and she said, if you're brave, ask your heirs, your children, what is the legacy you are currently leaving them? Legacy is not just money, and it's not just when you die. You are creating a legacy right now. And that's a fascinating conversation. If you are brave and are ready for that conversation, ask your son or your daughter, what is the legacy I am leaving? I wish you well in it, because might be a challenging conversation. And she said, if you're still alive and you don't like the legacy, the answer you get, you have the opportunity to change it if you want to. So I did it with my son, mostly because I was doing a podcast interview with the author Thayer Willis the next day, and I thought, oh shoot, I'm having breakfast with my son, I might as well do this. She's going to ask me, have you done it yourself? And we had a fabulous conversation about life and love and each other, what we mean to each other, where we can improve. It was just amazing.
Yeah, I have one that's kind of similar, but it'll be like, what's one character trait or what's one personality trait you hope to inherit from your mother or from your father? That's a really interesting conversation. And you could get real dangerous with what's one thing that you actually hope that to not inherit. And sometimes you need to go there, to talk about some things that are real. But I love good questions.
Yeah.
Well, we are about 20 minutes before, so I want to get started with Tammy Miller. Tammy, if you're available to jump on and ask your question, that's great. And if not, I can ask it myself. But Tammy, if you're available, do you want to ask Tom your question?
Hi, Dave. Hi, Tom. Thank you. Really, really great conversation. One thing that struck me that I just love that you said was drafting trusts. And I think the words were with a warm heart rather than a cold hand. And I think that's so, so important. And I'm wondering if you might talk just a little bit more about that. And in particular, how do you set the stage for that, the process of leading with your heart to take precedence over, the financial and the legal and all the other aspects of that trust planning process?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would certainly direct you to the chapter in the book for more thoughts on that. And Jay Hughes is a great resource. Some of his books that talk a lot about that as well. I just think it's very interesting how we end up being driven by the financial in so many ways, and the legal, and we're pushed into you have to protect, you have to guard against, and it's just going through the process of a prenuptial agreement, and that kind of situation with a client, and how quickly the lawyers move in and require things, and you realize, oh my gosh, this is getting out of hand. This was not the point, and so I think part of it is not related to the particular document you're drafting. A lot of it is how you begin to have conversations as a family, and there are documents that come up, things that need to be signed. There are agreements that need to be made. So what I see with successful families in this area is, before temperatures are high, so not in the moment, but well before the moment, to talk through these issues and decide together how they're going to decide. So we've got a family. There's a parent and 4 children, one parent and 4 children, and they created with our help what we call a family playbook. And it is it goes through all the decisions that they are going to make. Who's going to get money for a house? What do we all agree? How are we going to handle when new people come into the family? How do we handle it? And if you can do that kind of thing before the moment, and then it's not so much of a panic, and it's more even-handed. But really, the conversation is much more than that. It's about what is the wealth for? And if it's to benefit the next generation, I think Jay talks about this all the time. This trust, writing into the document, this trust is a gift of love. Imagine that being the first thing that you read, as opposed to, you know, here are the various recitals of legal explanations. And so, you know, it's there's no simple answer to this, but I think it's the attitude that particularly the founders and senior generations who are passing money on, you know, deciding that this is going to be a gift of love and that these are human beings they're giving the money to, not just legal recipients.
One question I like to ask, to just get the founder or the wealth creator in the right mindset is, you know, what is the greatest non-financial hope that you have for your estate plan? Like, what is the greatest non-financial outcome you hope to achieve with your estate plan? And it's enough, sometimes that question is enough to shift them away from strategy,
Yeah.
away from what their technical experts have told them, a friend at the club, you know, some technique. And if they can articulate what their greatest hope is for their children and their grandchildren, then, you know, as an advisor, we can become a translator. And if we can translate that and communicate love in those documents, and also revisit those documents regularly enough to reiterate the why and the purpose for which those documents even exist, all of those things have shown helpful to me.
I agree with that entirely.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, I would invite others, if you have questions, please submit those in the chat, or if you'd like to just take yourself off of mute, that's great. I have plenty of other questions for Tom, but don't want to hog the show. So any other questions at this moment from the audience? All right.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
maybe-
going to move. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Maybe I just jumped
for it.
right in very spontaneously. What came up? I really like the approach to see the whole process of serving families no longer only as an issue of finance or insurance or whatever, wealth advisory in the classical form, but to see it as I would say as a more human, not only interaction, but based on deep humanity. Maybe it's a big word, but maybe I can call it this way. So I really like this, and this is definitely my approach that I'm doing as a private mentor. My question is, the openness. What is your experience regarding the openness within the families and within the people you are talking to and you're advising with this? Is there an openness, or does it depend on their level of consciousness? So where are they with their own personal development? I'm very curious to learn a little bit more about this, because I have become very, very much selective, only working with my clients who are open for this approach and open for a deeper question and open for a word like love within a contract. I'm a lawyer. I'm a trained lawyer in Switzerland and in Germany. And I had to learn this myself. So I'm very curious to hear your experiences in, I would say, opening these very deep doors.
Tom, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, that's a great comment. I agree. There's obviously different levels of openness. One of the questions people ask me often is, because we get into all the details of people's lives, people often say, well, do people disclose to you? And I think they're primarily asking about, you know, financial and family details. And one of the, it's a very easy answer in our world. Absolutely, they do. And it is like, and I liken it to going to the doctor. You know, you basically, you disclose, because this is a professional who has your interests at heart. And in our particular profession, we have nothing to sell. So there's people come to us, and we're integrated and holistic. So people come to us knowing that these are the people that I'm going to tell everything to. It's not always the case for every advisor, because if an advisor is in a particular narrow area, more narrow area, then perhaps families don't want to, you know, go to those other areas. But that's not the case with us. And then another area of disclosure is how much do they want to disclose to each other? Not so much husband and wife, but rather what are they ready to disclose to the rest of the family, namely children. And then a third level of disclosure, maybe is the one that you're talking about, or openness rather, is the whole question of, you know, can I get in touch with my, you know, myself, my feelings, you know, can I talk about, you know, and I would say it's I don't know what percentage of our discovery meetings have tears in them, but I would say quite a lot. And because if we allow silence, allow conversation, you know, as I always say, my favorite question to a family is, which literally after, like, that's in the middle of a conversation, or tell me more. That as people talk, as they're given room to talk, because often they aren't, if they're given room and space to talk, often what comes out is something just that little bit deeper. And I would say it takes, you know, it does take time and trust to build that kind of relationship. Other things come out in later meetings. But I'm always, you know, a little bit pleasantly surprised how much comes out, because often people have never had the place to share that before. And it's significant to the development of their family, either financially or in, you know, in other probably massively more important ways.
I would just add one thing to that. And part of it is that we need to communicate our intentions with them. So many times families come and they see, oh, trained attorney, or they see CPA, or they see certified financial planner, and they put you into a box of this person is gonna solve my tax issue, or this person's gonna solve my legal issue. And so I think it is important to slow down and to tell the family or tell the individual exactly how you want to be in relationship with them. You know, we don't serve wealth creators, we serve family units. Like a statement like that is something that is maybe feel a little jarring and a little bit different. Or we live at the intersection of the financial and non-financial lives of our clients. Well, what does that mean? You know, things that will allow them to understand how you want to be in relationship with them and the types of things that you want to do. And then when necessary, being vulnerable with them about how we feel and about things that we've chosen to do, or things that we've made mistakes about with our own families. I think when we go first on some of those things, we give permission for others to show up and be vulnerable too.
Absolutely. This is definitely my experience in working with the clients. And just one sentence regarding the labeling. I've come across this for a long time in the past, being a lawyer and being approached for a legal problem. Was sometimes it was a bit difficult for me to take myself out of this box of a classical lawyer. And so I needed to reinvent this for ourselves, for our own company, for the exclusive advice thing that we do, not to name us as lawyers, but as personal confidants, as trusted advisors. So to open just the wording already from the very beginning, and from the intention on how we are serving. So definitely, I can definitely subscribe to this. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sharing.
And similarly, these families are not wealthy families. They're human beings having an extraordinary experience. They have some pain. They have things they're excited about, things they're anxious about. And so I think as we define ourselves, we also need to allow them to define themselves. Thank you so much for your question. Steve,
thank you very much.
Your virtual hand is raised.
It is. Thanks, Tom. I pulled out the signed copy of the book I got at your book launch in Toronto last fall. Thank you. You've given me the impetus to go and open it up and look back into it, because it's not something that you read cover to cover, but there's so many great things in here. And my question kind of follows on the past one, but it's more from the whole field of serving wealthy families and how it continues to evolve. And I wonder if you had tried to put this book together 20 years ago, would it have even been possible? Because it feels to me like there's this crescendo of families being open to this and people being ready to respond to the demand for it like we've never seen before. And so just if you could just talk to how easy it was to get so many people to supply so many good things compared to how it was. You said you've been in this field for a long time. How hard were these discussions to even have back a couple of decades ago compared to where they are now? And has the supply of the people to do this helped increase the demand for the families to be asking for these things?
Yeah, very, very good thought. Well, it's interesting. The founding story for our firm, which is called Northwood Family Office, is exactly that. Our family was 25 years ago was looking for what I would now call a family office. I didn't really know what it was 25 years ago, and I was in the financial investment business. And my father said to me, we should sort out our affairs, before I die versus after. I thought, well, there's a good idea. So I went to his accountant and said that to the accountant. And what did the accountant say? So, well, you could do an estate freeze, go talk to this lawyer. You can do an insurance policy, go talk to your insurance agent. It was a 3-minute conversation. He could easily have said to me, interesting. What are you thinking? How can I help? He could have said, tell me more. But he didn't, thankfully, because that led me to end up starting my business. Because I was a senior exec inside a financial firm, and I obviously couldn't find that inside my firm. So I was looking for somebody who was objective, had knowledge across a range of integrated issues, and I couldn't find it. And then I looked to the US and saw this thing called a family office and thought, oh, well, maybe that's what it is. And I come from a very entrepreneurial family. I was the lone corporate guy. I've got 25 first cousins on that side of the family, and most of them are entrepreneurs. And so it was kind of always on my list. I thought, well, maybe I should just go do this. They say the best entrepreneurs are frustrated consumers. So there's a firsthand example 25 years ago, say, that it just wasn't there at all. It's certainly developed quite a lot over those years. And of course, what often happens too is what's come with that is confusion, because now everybody, like what I always say, when I started in the business, people didn't know what a family office was. They thought it was birth control and family counseling. And 25 years later, everybody says they are one. So that's what's happened in 25 years. And they're not all a family office. Not everybody provides integrated advice. So, but to answer your other question, yes, there's now this recognition that there are, number one, things need to be integrated and connected for the family. There's a recognition that it's not just about the money, it's about people, and all these things are converging. And yes, I think this book would not have anywhere been possible 20 years ago. And what's happened, I think that one of the questions you asked was, what is the willingness of people to contribute and participate in this? And it's absolutely phenomenal. Basically, we called people up and said, would you be willing to? And they said yes, and delivered on time, more or less. Like, amazing. It's like herding cats, but they were very orderly cats and very willing cats. So it was just a spectacular experience of unbelievably thoughtful and qualified people in the world. So it's just been a beautiful experience. And I have to say, no surprise, but you learn, like I've taken as much out of this as any average reader. One of the practices that I've now included in my own practice is in the foreword. Jay Hughes talks about something that he's practiced for years, is thinking about before he goes into a meeting with a family or a group that he's speaking to, he takes 5 or 10 minutes, finds somewhere quiet to be, centers himself, and thinks about each person in the room individually. Who is this person? They're 30 years old. They must be going through this type of issue. She's 60, probably going through this, and thinks about all the people that he's going to encounter. I do that now. Why? Because I read this book. and it's fantastic. So there's so many ideas, and not every idea will touch you that way. It'll be a different one that strikes you. But that's the beauty of 62 practices that you can pick and choose that may help you.
I'll say one other thing to that, Tom. I mean, each one of those 62 authors it sees the world as abundant, and that there are not enough of us doing this work. And there are a lot of advisors that see the world as scarce, and those are not going to ever show up in this book. Anyways, Steve, thanks for the question. We have time for just one more question. Ginny, I see your little virtual hand up there. What's your question?
Hopefully it's a real quick one. So I love this whole conversation about titles that we carry and how we are judged, if you will, by what our title is. So where I am at, my title is Family Dynamics Consultant. And so what's kind of interesting is the minute you hear family dynamics, I think what people think is, oh, you only talk with families who are fighting with each other. And that all you deal with is the fighting. So I would love to hear what titles people use to describe who they are doing this so important work.
Great question.
Tom, do you have that?
No, I don't. That's a good question. Actually, on that particular one, family dynamics, it's interesting to talk to the people who wrote in this chapter. I talked to a number of them and said, what's the best term to use for that particular area? And there was a very wide range of views on it. So I don't know the answer. It's a great question, and maybe others have some thoughts on it.
Well, what's your title?
Mine, we're a family office.
But don't you have a title?
Family office advisor, and that I find that works for people. We describe ourselves as a general contractor in their euphemistically in their financial and family lives. Philippe, maybe you've got a comment.
Yes, thank you. I just said that family office has been a little bit worn out in my market where I live in Israel. Everyone calls themselves a family office when the moment they manage private money. So I'm now playing with the idea to calling myself family transition or business transition or family business transition consultant, because it's much more about the multi-generational transition than about how much money you make. So, but I don't like the word, so I still have to find a better definition. But I think it's very nice what you said, Jeannie. It's very much what you tell your people, that's what they think you are. You're tagging yourself. So I don't want to be that asset manager anymore. I've been you.
Philippe, you're a high-end general contractor to the wealthy.
Ultra high-end.
That only works if people like their general contractor too.
That's true. That's true. Maybe that's not a good idea. Thank you, Jenny. Lisa, you have a question?
A comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Jenny, I feel you. I feel your pain. I joined a firm that had baked a title for me before I got there. So I kind of walked into throes of this whole, you're the head of family dynamics at JP Morgan Wealth Management. What does that mean? And exactly the assumption that you mentioned, which is you must be the one who we bring in when our families are falling apart. And I've been on a roadshow lately to disabuse our advisors of that notion. And the way I've been doing it is since I seem to be stuck with the title for the time being, is to talk about what actually can we do to improve or create healthy family dynamics, right? And so, I've been talking about what it really means to have relationships in a family and what kinds of things fuel that relationship. So Tom McCullough, your talk is really spot on, because I'm talking about what is the experience of being this family, right? What does it mean to gather? What does it mean to share? What does it mean to learn together? Because these are the forces that actually animate healthy family dynamics, I think. That's my thesis.
So I think we're all leaving this call with a homework project to come up with a title for ourselves and the work that we do. We do need to get better at it. I mean, we need to have it be easier for families to understand what we do and what our intentions are. I have loved this conversation. The time has flown, Tom, and thank you so much for doing the work of putting this book together with Keith and your other 62 collaborators. Amazing. So I guess as we close, I just again want to thank you, Tom, for making time for this. And next month we will have Kristen Keffler join us about her book, The Myth of the Silver Spoon, which is fantastic as well. That will be on March 16th at 10 a.m. Pacific. want to just thank each one of you for investing an hour with Tom and I. And again, thank you for your time, and look forward to connecting with each one of you. Have a good
Thank you
afternoon.
very much.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank
Bye-bye from
you.
You're welcome.
Switzerland.